Coming up, DTVC Extra is back. This time we're going to be looking at the Expendables series. We'll be starting with Expendables and Expendables 2. Next week, we're going to have Ty from Come Up It's back on. We'll be looking at The Get Back and The Weapon, so a couple Tubi flicks that we checked out there. And then week after that, hopefully we'll be wrapping up the DTVC Extra series, look at the Expendables with Expendables 3 and then hopefully Expendables 4. So I've got to see that one here in the theater. It's the difference between that one and Fast X, when I saw that one in the theater, is that Fast X was on more screens here in Philly. Like the local theater near us, I think Expendables is showing it like 3 times a day, 3 or 4 times a day, and they're all in the afternoon. So I like to try to get like kind of earlier morning one in, like maybe like an 11 o'clock in the morning. University City here in Philly, the theater there, that one is showing an 11 o'clock showing. So I'll see if I can sneak over Saturday and maybe make it happen then. But you just don't know. And the other thing, too, of course, that worries me with Expendables 4 is how long will it be in the theater for, right? Like, how much of a chance will I get to see it? So if I don't see it, right, if it doesn't last in the theater, then I guess it's a matter of ponying up like $20 to do kind of a new on-demand kind of thing. But I want to see it in the theater, so hopefully that'll happen. And hopefully by the time I see it in the theater, we'll be in time for the that podcast episode that I'll be doing there. So so as I'm doing this podcast episode, I haven't seen 4 yet. I know some people have seen it. I think Bulletproof has already reviewed it, so you can always go check out, see what Bulletproof had to say about it there. I'm reserving. I don't want to see what they have to say yet, because I want to kind of go in cold or completely fresh. But we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens there. In terms of the site. The plan this week was, I think I've got Codename Vengeance, the Robert Ginty, Shannon Tweed flick there, which is interesting now because now that you mention it, right, because I was thinking about having Tweed go into the Hall of Fame. So doing a review for her now and then doing another one in a few weeks probably isn't going to work. So I'll probably do something else in that spot. One idea that I did have is Nathan Hill, who did Lady Terror, the film that, he's a director from Australia that had me screen that film for him. He had another film on Tubi called Revenge of the Guilo that was kind of a funny send-up of action films. And I might just review that one instead. Usually I do the screeners on Thursday nights. Try to do like maybe one or two a month if I can, which I've fallen behind on those anyway. So maybe just throw that one in there and get that one reviewed for this weekend. So we'll see what happens there. And then from there, we're going to get into the Hall of Fame, right? So we'll start doing those Hall of Fame posts. We've got Hard Target up first for Scott Adkins, and then from there, looking to do Badass for Danny Trejo, Night of the Wilding for Spiro Rosados, and Rowdy Girls, hopefully for Shannon Tweed. So hopefully we'll get those going soon here. I've got to watch all those movies, which I am behind on watching movies. So we'll see what happens there. In terms of other stuff, hopefully, as we're recording this now, I'm hoping Thursday evening, Thursday evening New York time here in the U.S. So it's probably really late for like England and other parts of the world. But hoping to be recording with John Cross again to do another one of our Jim Belushi films. So we have middle-aged men watching early '90s era Jim Belushi. Unironically, right? That's the show. We did Traces of Red a couple weeks ago. People really enjoyed it, so going to do the same thing. So we'll be recording it live. It will be on YouTube Live. So if you're not subscribed to After Movie Diner on YouTube, you should go and subscribe to that on YouTube. Then you'll probably get notifications for when we record the next one again. Of course, if you miss it, you can always just watch it on your own time. What's fun about being there to watch it as we're recording it is you can ask questions in the chats and we can respond. And so you can it's a little more interactive that way. So encourage you to listen. And again, that's the plan. In terms of time, like I said, probably 8:30 at night New York time is when we do it, which I know that's like. What is that, like 1 in the morning, 1:30 in the morning in UK time? So probably for the UK listeners, that's probably not going to work. And I think it's like 2:30 in the morning, right, for people in Western Europe or Central European time. So probably a little tough. And to be honest, probably a little tough for the West Coast too, right? Because that's like 5:30 p.m. You're commuting back from work, that kind of thing. So again, that's totally understood that it's hard to kind of be there at that exact time. So if you can't make it, no worries. You can always watch the episodes after the fact because they are recorded. They get stored on YouTube. And definitely always appreciate people helping out with that kind of thing. Finally, of course, my novel or my novella, Bainbridge. So definitely check that out. You can get that on Amazon or Amazon in paperback or through Kindle Unlimited. Like I said, it's about 80 pages long, so it's not a really long thing. But it's a kind of a fun throwback to 90s action there too. So I think people listening to this podcast who like listening to me talk about action, are into action films, want to see me review action films, that kind of thing. Hopefully this book will sort of resonate with you. That you'll kind of hear this and see some of the inside jokes that I put in there. Get a kick out of the character, all of that kind of stuff. So I definitely encourage you to check it out. Like I said, it's only like 80 pages, which I know one of my coworkers recently, she saw that it was available and she was like, "Oh, this is great. This is a lot quicker read, right, than my novel." So we'll see. I'm still kind of planning to get my next novel out sometime in November. I'm currently in the process of writing another rough draft for a novel right now. So the way my writing cadence usually goes is I write a rough draft in a year and then finish off and publish a completed work in a year. And then throughout the rest of the year, I'm proofreading other things. So for example, the piece that I'm writing right now, the novel that I'm writing right now, the goal is that to have that thing ready to publish in 3 years. So what I'm writing now, I want to have published in 2026. So the novel, for example, that I am getting published this year, Don's House in the Mountains, I wrote it during the kind of the initial lockdown phase, right, in 2020. So, rough draft written in 2020, and then just a series of rewrites, rereads, and proofreading and editing and all of that. So it just kind of happens, over that 3-year period. And then usually, the hope is by the time we hit the end of that 3-year period, I've got something complete enough that I can publish. And so that's always the goal. Bainbridge was something a little bit different. Bainbridge was something different that I've been working on kind of on the side in between those rewrites or rereads through the other rough drafts. And it was done enough. And I was like, why don't I just put it out there and kind of see how it does? And I think, it's something that I'm exclusively marketing to the DTVC audience. So it's not something I'm putting on my personal Facebook. I'm not putting it on my personal Instagram or anything like that. I'm not telling my family and friends. My coworker only found out because she bought one of my previous novels and Amazon tipped her off that this one was out, and so that's why she bought it. But kind of more just having it there for the DTVC audience and just sort of seeing how everybody thinks. And again, if people appreciate it, everybody enjoys it, and they want to see more, maybe come up with more stuff. I don't know. I was initially thinking that it would be long. If I kept going with this, that it would be longer pieces. But who knows? Maybe the 80-page format, the novella format, is what would work for this. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what people think of it. All right, so I think that is everything. So what we'll do here is, John Cross from After Movie Diner, he's going to play our theme song here, and then we will start off by talking about the first Expendables film. All right, so let's get stuck in on the first Expendables movie. So, I think there's always a kind of a two-prong approach that I like to do with looking at some of these films, is to sort of maybe talk about the movie on its own merits, but also maybe sort of discuss it in context at the time that it came out. It's interesting here with this one being in 2010. From my site at that time, I started the site in 2007, and I don't want to say it was the height of when my site was, when the DTVC was at its biggest, but it was at a point where there was a lot of engagement, a lot of other sites that were out there that were doing stuff like this. And so there's a lot of buzz. We were all really talking about this thing. We were all excited for it, and we were all, really, really anticipating it. I didn't get to see it in the theater. At that time, I really wasn't seeing much in the theater, so so it didn't matter. I don't think I saw it in the theater anyway. I'm pretty sure. I saw it after the fact, rented it after or something like that. But there was. I think probably the biggest excitement for us was seeing Dolph on the big screen again. Right, it had been a while since he'd been on the big screen, and on the site he had become so huge, right, that he was. I called him the Babe Ruth of direct-to-video action or direct-to-video movies, and it was one of those things where, whenever I posted a Dolph, and it's kind of still that way, whenever I post a Dolph Lundgren movie, I don't know that there's anybody that moves the needle like him. Seagal might be the only one, right? But other than Seagal and him, really there's nobody else that's that big. So, we were kind of excited from that standpoint. I think sort of from a general action standpoint, people were excited to see what Stallone was going to do again. They're excited to see what Statham would do in this movie. He was still a really big name at that time. So that was another piece of it. And then, of course, you've got all the names that were involved, right? Jet Li, Randy Couture, Mickey Rourke, right, with his smaller part there. Terry Crews, all the Eric Roberts, of course, as the baddie. But then, of course, like a really interesting one, right, for us as direct-to-video fans was Gary Daniels, right? And it's interesting with the Gary Daniels piece because at the time, it made sense that Gary Daniels would be in the role that he would have, right? That he would be a part of this film. But when I think it was when Gary Daniels was talking on Scott Adkins's podcast, I think it's called The Art of Action, the YouTube videos that he does. I think there, Gary Daniels said that he wasn't originally supposed to have as big of a part as he did, and he ended up kind of, when he was on set, his part kind of grew once Stallone understood what he could do and what his acumen was. So for us, we just took for granted that, yeah, of course Gary Daniels would have this big part in the film as one of the baddies, when actually that wasn't the case before. He wasn't originally supposed to be have that robust of a role. So that was another piece that I think we were all really excited about, but we were kind of in that minority, right? It was kind of a unique thing that you had big screen action fans that were looking for their people, and then us as direct-to-video action fans who, again, we still like the big budget stuff, but we had our people, we had our crew that we were looking for as well. So that was kind of a cool thing too, to see that merging happen. The movie itself, though, watching it again for these podcasts. So just to give you a sense, recently I went out to work I went out to San Francisco for work, and I downloaded the Expendables, the 3 Expendables films. They're on Netflix. I downloaded them using the app, and actually they played back really well. I can't say the same thing for AMC Plus's app. I tried to download VFW and it didn't. I downloaded it, but it didn't play well. But Netflix did really well with that. So I will say, for anybody out there, if you're traveling and you've got Netflix, do the download thing, because the movies come out really nice. But in watching this first Expendables film, from 2010. And kind of looking at the way action is, look at what action has become now, especially having watched, those Fast and Furious films. It's amazing, like, how, I don't want to say perfect the Expendables film is, but really just how kind of meat and potatoes it is, right? You've got a very simple plot. Some baddies have taken over a small island in the Caribbean, and they're forcing the residents to grow drugs, right? Or farm drugs that the baddies are then selling, right? We've got Eric Roberts as, your perfect scenery chewing baddie there. Stone Cold Steve Austin as his second in command, and Gary Daniels under him. And then, of course, you've got the horrible dictator as well. All of that just really plays well. And, you think of action films now, it's almost like an action film. It's almost like if you took this script to a production company and said, hey, this is the movie we want to make, they'd be like, but that's not big enough, right? It'd be like, you need these baddies who are doing things like stealing nuclear codes, right? Or stealing like these electronic weapons that can, turn off all the computers or see all the computers in the world or whatever, right? Some sort of like, tipping the balance of power or whatever kind of thing. And this is just a simple, like, hey, this guy's, creating his own drug empire out of this small, I don't want to say banana republic, that's a dismissive term, but, this small country in the Caribbean. But it works, right? It works really well. It's just straight ahead, great action. Stallone does kind of the James Bond approach, where he's got an action sequence that doesn't have anything to do with the rest of the plot to start the film. It gets us involved. It introduces us to the characters. It sets the stage for what Dolph's character is going to be. All of that really works. we get these really great scenes, this really great character development there. And I think having the number of names in this, the character development part works, right? Sometimes story can get in the way of action, but when you've got all of these great names and they're all interacting with each other, sometimes it's just fun to watch them interacting. So, so that part of it works as well. But, Stallone was great. I think one of the things I was always saying for a long time was that I felt like Dolph stole the movie from Stallone. Watching this time around, I think that's more of a harsh take. Dolph really stands out in this, and we'll get to that in a second. But, this is Stallone's movie, and Stallone does a really great job in creating this the character that the Barney Ross character that the series is going to be based on. It's another one of his iconic characters, right? Not quite to the level of like Rocky or Rambo, but he does a good job of creating those kinds of characters and giving us somebody that we want to root for, right? That we think is compelling. Now, when we get into Expendables 3, we'll talk about where he kind of goes off the rails with that, but he does a great job establishing it here. The interplay that he has with Jason Statham is also really fantastic. And, we think about the Fast and Furious movies where they felt like Statham had really great chemistry with The Rock, right, with Dwayne Johnson, and that's when they made the Hobbs and Shaw movies. It's interesting here, right, that Stallone is not saying like we're gonna branch off and make the whole movie, Statham and Stallone, right? But the interplay is really good there that he can lean on it enough to have some more of the focus on that there. And again, that really works as well because they have that scene where they infiltrate the island to try to get a sense of like what's going on there, so they know what they're up against. And Statham and Stallone, they do the reconnaissance together while everybody else stays behind. That was really great stuff there as well. So the whole thing just really worked, and I think it's a rare thing when a project like this is announced and we find out that this is coming, that it delivers on the level that we hope it will deliver on. And I think for the most part, this does. I mean, you can make some complaints here and there. Maybe there's not enough Jet Li. Maybe there's not enough of this person or that person. But I don't know. I don't. For what we were expecting out of this for me, this really delivered. And that's why we were all so excited to for when the second one came out and go from there, because it did work, right? Every part of it did work. And so that's kind of the first takeaway, that watching this again, I was reminded about how great, just simple action can be. And I'm not saying simple in the sense that there weren't really, really elaborate action set pieces that were put together with really great stunts, really great explosions, really great effects, right? It was complicated in that sense, but from a story standpoint, nobody was trying to conquer the world, right? Eric Roberts' character wasn't trying to take over the world. He wasn't trying to disrupt, all of the United Nations or all, whatever these stories you get are, right? There wasn't some major elaborate heist or anything either involved, right? Like even when we get to the end of the movie and they're going in to sort of get the girl back and take down the baddies, even that part, for as great as the action sequences are, the rest of it is pretty straightforward, right? It's not like they're planning some huge like elaborate plot thing that's got twists and turns and how did they end up with the money and all of that stuff. It's none of that is there. It's just the good guys against the bad guys. Let's blow up as much shit as possible, but let's do it in a way that's really, really nice to see. And of course, Spiro Rosatos action directed this one, so we can't expect anything less from him on this. So, I think there's something to be said, and I'm hoping that the fourth one, when I go see it, it comes back to this level of movie. I know every time you build a sequel, the idea is you've got to make it bigger and better, and I don't know if, part two, we'll talk about part two here in a little bit, so I don't want to step on that conversation too much, and I think part two is a good gradual progression from this one. But I think, maybe part three, we'll talk about some of the areas where part three was sauteed in wrong sauce in the next DTVC Extra episode when we talk about 3 and 4. And so I guess that's a sense that, you couldn't just keep making this movie over and over again, right, for sequels. Though, to be honest, I think as an audience, I think we would have enjoyed it. We would have been okay with it, just maybe bring in new names, right, have new people involved. But, again, what we get here is just a great straight-ahead actioner. And I think the other thing, too, for us at the time, this was 2010, and there was a sense at that time of we haven't seen a movie like this in the theater in so long, right? That and to be honest, Marvel hadn't really taken off the way we understand Marvel to be now, right? Iron Man came out in 2009. They were just starting to get moving, We had the Dark Knight movies at that time for the Batman movies, but and then of course the Fast and Furious films, they still kind of as well, right? They were kind of, I don't know, they hadn't quite gotten to their point, right, where they were doing the whole. I think when was it? So I'm trying to think. Right, was it 2011 when number 5 comes out, and I think that's when they start kind of, going to this kind of over the top sort of thing. But what we hadn't seen kind of this sort of throwback to. We hadn't seen this kind of throwback to. The action that we knew from the 80s and 90s in so long, and I think we were just so excited. I know I was just so excited to just get something that matched that just worked on that level. So that was the first thing there. Of course, the Dolph piece is big, right? Because Dolph, this movie, it almost creates like what Mitch from the Video Vacuum referred to as a Dolph-essence, right? That we get this sort of renaissance in Dolph's career where he, people recognize how cool he was again. And I was trying to think like in terms of like mainstream, big budget movies, it had been a while for him. And his career, if you look at it, his career is kind of going in an interesting direction, right? So, he goes through the 90s where he's sort of this kind of big direct-to-video guy, but the movies are varying levels of quality, right? Sweepers. I mean, I like Bridge of Dragons. I don't know necessarily how he would have felt about Bridge of Dragons. Stormcatcher does a USA Pictures original with Blackjack. But then as the 2000s, the 90s go into the 2000s, right? We get to that period where Seagal and Van Damme in particular drop down to direct-to-video, right? They've given up trying to make it on the big screen, and now they're direct-to-video. And that meant that I think the level of quality of stuff that Dolph was getting was a lower quality. So he's starting to kind of make his own stuff, right? He's directing his own thing. So that's where you get, the Defender that he directs. You get, Diamond Dogs, Command Performance. And so he's going to start to make his own things, but also as the decade goes on into 2010, you get the Universal Soldier sequels that are starting to come out as well. So he's starting to get into some other stuff, and then the Expendables comes, and it's almost like at the perfect time where I think he's starting to find his career sort of to transition a little bit. So like, okay, if I'm going to be doing this direct-to-video stuff, I want to do stuff that resonates better with me, and then. With the Expendables, everybody looks at him like, hey, how do we forget about this guy? We loved him in Masters of the Universe. We loved him in Rocky IV. And of course, for us in the DTV world, it was like, we've been telling you for years about Dolph. What are you talking about? How is this a surprise to you that Dolph is this really great guy? And so, he does this one. Of course, he does Expendables 2, kind of falls right on the back of that. And, granted, at the same time, he starts kind of getting some lower end direct-to-video stuff, and I think there was some stuff going on in his personal life at that time where maybe marital issues, maybe where he was looking to kind of just get as much work as possible. I'm not sure exactly, but the work starts to kind of the DTV stuff isn't as great, but then he's still getting big budget things, right? He's in Hail Caesar, Coen Brothers film, and then he starts working with Stallone to do the Creed sequel. He's getting into more stuff, and people are starting to recognize him again. And I think this is what the catalyst is for that. And it comes at a time when he's starting to sort of take a different ownership of his career, at least it feels like anyway. And so it kind of comes at the right time there. And I think for us as Dolph fans to see him do so well in this, because I didn't know what to expect from Dolph being in this movie. I think there was a part of me that was sort of setting myself up to think, like, he may only have a really small part. He might have the kind of part that, like, Randy Couture or Terry Crews would have. Or even Jet Li, right? That, Jet Li has not as big a part as what Dolph has here. So I think that was part of it, was just sort of setting myself up to know, like, hey, just having Dolph in the movie alone should be enough, right, to be happy about. But then to see him get the part he has, to see him hit it out of the park and just be so cool. The fight scene that he has with Jet Li was fantastic. And I think that was also something I'll get into in a second, just the way that Stallone and the fight choreographers and everybody put that fight together was just really fantastic. But I think that was for talking to other people at the time when we saw this movie, that was a piece that we were all really excited about. Like, let's see what happens with Dolph after this, because now everybody that had forgotten about Dolph in the late 80s we're all coming back to him now and seeing what we knew for years is just how great Dolph is. Like he never stopped being great for us, right? We were watching those direct-to-video movies and seeing him in them. But for everybody else, it's like, oh yeah, maybe we should have him in commercials. Maybe we should have him on our TV show, right? Maybe we should do an episode of Arrow or whatever. What was that show that the CIA one that had Zachary Levi, Chuck? Yeah, was it just called Chuck? I guess that's what it was, just called Chuck. Anyway, you know what I'm saying, though. He's doing commercials again. All kinds of stuff like that. It was like Mitch from Video Vacuum said when I had him on to discuss Altitude. It was a Dolph-a-sance. And at that time we were talking about it. This was, I think it was 2020 when I had Mitch on to discuss that, and it was like, yeah, we're hitting this Dolph-a-sance, and I think we're still kind of in that Dolph-a-sance. And the other thing that's been great about Dolph throughout this period post the Expendables is that he's done a lot of interesting films, especially in the 2010s, kind of in between the Expendables films. Some of those movies. I think one of the worst is Ambushed, right? But that's not really Dolph's fault that it's so bad. That's what I always think of as the worst bait and switch film ever, where you see a trailer that sets it up as this really great like back and forth between Dolph as a DEA agent and Randy Couture as a drug dealer. And we find out that no, that's not what the movie is. It's some sort of jackass guys like, Bildungsroman or something like that, which is kind of obnoxious. So you get some movies like that don't really hit well, that don't really do that great. Legendary is another rough one that he does with Scott Adkins. I mean, he's got some great movies with Scott Adkins. That wasn't one of them. So there's definitely some stinkers that come after the Expendables period. But I think overall, there's that sense that Dolph is back, and again, not back for us, right? We were there with him the whole time, but back for everybody else, and I think that's been something that's been really cool to see. I want to get back to that fight scene that he does with Jet Li because I think that was something that was really cool there. One of the things when it comes to fight scenes in movies, right, is that a lot of times you get this smaller person who just by virtue of the fact that they're really skilled at martial arts, that can take out a bigger person. And we don't always get that sense of someone the size, speed, and athleticism that Dolph has. Matthias Hughes, Michael Jai White's another one like that. That we don't get a sense of how that plays in real life, right? That in real life, like a Jet Li, if he fought a Dolph Lundgren, he would have trouble really, really hurting him. I mean, now, of course, when they're older, that's a different thing. But, when both are in their prime, both are in their young ages, Dolph is just so big, right, that it's hard to hurt him. Matthias Hughes is another one like that. And again, I mentioned Michael Jai White. Michael Jai White took a lot of heat when he said that he could take Bruce Lee in a fight. And I kind of get what he was saying though when he was saying that, and that is just that he's so much bigger than Bruce Lee that no matter how skilled Bruce Lee is, if somebody is that big and that athletic, it can be hard to manage them. Part of it, I think, for me being a football, fan of American football, you see these massive players that are just huge but yet athletic at the same time. I think it was a player, Kyle Turley, who played a baddie in a horror film that I reviewed on the site, and I was like, an offensive lineman would be like the perfect horror villain because they're massive, right? They're over 300 pounds, but they're so athletic, much more than you would imagine. They can run faster than the average person. This is kind of like Supermensch kind of thing. And what this movie does, what Expendables does, is that they have a fight scene between Dolph and Jet Li, where they don't just say oh, Jet Li is going to be able to handle him, or that it'll be like a back and forth kind of even thing. What they do to make it more realistic is they show, Jet Li lands kicks that don't really hurt Dolph as much, or that Dolph is able to just catch him and throw him. And so what Jet Li does is he takes him into an area where his size is actually an advantage, right? Where Dolph's height is a problem, where they're under some scaffolding and all of that. And it makes the fight much more dynamic. And I really appreciated that, I don't know whose idea that was, if that was Stallone's idea, if Stallone was kind of thinking in real life, Jet Li would have trouble fighting Dolph Lundgren because of the size disparity. Or if, Spiro Rosados, their fight coordinators, whoever it was that came up with that. But I really appreciated them using that element of it because it's just not something you see much. You'd see Matthias Hughes in a PM Entertainment flick, and somebody that's half of his size would take him out. And you'd wonder, where did that come from? Or I think was it Triple Threat, right, where you had Iko Uwais fighting Michael Jai White. And I think in that one they did do some creative things there. I think Jesse V. Johnson did some creative things to kind of make it so okay, these are some ways that he might beat him, because otherwise, how do you beat Michael Jai White, right? Michael Jai White is he is an extreme athlete, but also his size. It just, there are very few people that would be able to land attacks that, even if you land them, would even hurt him. And I mean, that's one of the things I think with Michael Jai White, that it's hard to make him a baddie, because how do you defeat him, right? How does a good guy defeat him? Which, same thing that would always happen with Matthias Hughes, same thing that happens with Dolph, right? When Dolph is a baddie. This movie, I think, did a really great job with it. I thought they did a great job in incorporating that piece there. So, a lot of little things like that. I mean, just the blowing up of the buildings at the end of the film was really fantastic. The sets that they used were really great. The interplay. I mean, even the scenes where Stallone is just chatting with Mickey Rourke, and it's an emotional scene where they're talking about their lives as mercenaries. It worked well enough. It was good enough. All of it was good enough, and then the action was just so fantastic. Yeah, I think watching this again was just a reminder that we got something here that we were looking for. We were craving this in 2010, and Stallone delivered it in a way that I think we hoped for, but we didn't have our hopes up that, we were hoping it would be this, but we didn't expect it to deliver to this level. And I think that's going to be the lasting legacy of this film. I mean, again, it's over 13 years old now, so it's amazing it's been that long that it's come out. But I think as fans of action, this movie really delivered. It delivers in a way that I think for us that really like those movies of the 80s and 90s. Stallone got it, and he gave it to us the way we wanted to. So, yeah, I think, if you haven't seen this one in a while, definitely check it out. I mean, if you're going to go see number 4, you might as well check out all 3 of them again. But I think, this one doesn't get old. This one aged perfectly, and it was just another great time. So, yeah, so what we'll do here, we'll take a break, and then we will talk about Expendables 2.
Hey, everyone. We'll get back to the podcast in a second. But first, I have a new novel out, Holtman Arms. It follows Colvin Hall, an aspiring writer who decides to write a romance novel on a whim, sends it to a publisher, and it becomes a huge success. The only problem is, no one knows it's him because he writes under the pen name Mary Ballantyne. With all of the money and none of the fame, Colvin longs for the world to recognize his accomplishments. When he gets an opportunity to write a freelance article on a washed-up 90s pop star looking for a comeback, that recognition starts to come, but is it all he hoped for? It doesn't matter, because he's getting it whether he likes it or not. Holtman Arms is the second in my author's cycle after A Girl and a Gun, and like that previous novel, it explores themes of success and accomplishment in the 21st century. You can buy it now through Amazon in paperback or on Kindle. The link is in the podcast description. As always, thanks for your support.
All right, we are back, and we are looking at Expendables 2. So, I think kind of going back to that whole sort of putting everything in context, first Expendables hit it out of the park, right? It delivered everything that we were expecting from Expendables movies. So we knew there was going to be a sequel, and it was a question of how is this sequel going to be better, right? Or even be just as good, right? We wanted something that was at least just as good as the first one. But, what was that going to look like? I remember in JCVD that Van Damme had said there that, he didn't like the part Stallone had for him in the first Expendables movie, so he turned down the role. And then, of course, we saw how big it was. And I was thinking about how big that first Expendables movie was. It had a budget of $80 million, I think, and it grossed over $100 million, something like that. I mean, I don't know if that's the huge success that you think it would be. Oh, actually, no, I'm sorry, $80 million, but it grossed almost $300 million worldwide, $275 million worldwide. So, so it made more than 3 times its budget back, which is the key, right? A movie needs to make 3 times its budget back. So it was a success enough that there was going to be a sequel, and it was a success enough for the people involved, especially for someone like Dolph, that that someone like Van Damme would want to be a part of this now, right? That he would want to have his piece of it now, right? And have something to do with it. And of course, I think, Stallone's mindset was okay, if you're going to be in this, you got to be a baddie. And he hits the baddie out of the park. So, really great stuff there. I mean, kind of going back to the first one, when I was talking about that, where I said, I thought that Dolph my old narrative on it was that Dolph steals the movie from Stallone, and I said maybe that was a harsh narrative, that really Dolph is really good in it, but it's still Stallone's movie. Same thing here. I used to always say that Van Damme stole the movie from Stallone. I don't think that's the case, really, watching it again the second time. This is still Stallone's movie. It's still the Barney Ross story, and he makes it compelling in that sense. But Van Damme comes in as such a fantastic baddie, right? You needed a baddie that would at least be on par with Eric Roberts, if not better, to make the second movie better. And he does that. He delivers that there. So that was something that I really appreciated there. It was really good to see that from Van Damme as well. To see him, again, talk about how he turned down the first one because he didn't like the role he gets. He gets the villain part in this, and he hits it out of the park. The other thing I think in terms of the characters or the other players involved that I really liked was that from a story standpoint, you'd have these situations where, the Expendables gang would get themselves into trouble and they need someone to bail them out, right? And it would be maybe like Chuck Norris would bail them out, right? Or Schwarzenegger. And from a story standpoint, right, it almost sounds kind of lazy, right? Like our heroes don't figure anything out on their own. They just get saved by one of these people. But because it's Chuck Norris or because it's Schwarzenegger, as a plot device, it's actually a lot of fun, right? It's really fun when the team are pinned down in this Eastern European town, and Chuck Norris just blows everybody away and shows up and hey, I'm here. I'm the lone wolf kind of character. Of course, then they mix in some great Chuck Norris jokes in there, right? He gets bitten by a snake. After 5 days of agonizing pain, the snake died. That kind of stuff. It's a lot of fun for us, and it kind of builds up to that, where you get to that end where everybody's involved and everybody's shooting up an airport, and there's a final fight between Stallone and Van Damme that was a good final fight that I think was what you'd want from those two. All of that really worked. From a story standpoint, right, we build it up a little level, right? So we go from Eric Roberts, who was creating his own narco kingdom, to Van Damme's character who's stealing, I can't remember if it was uranium or plutonium. I probably should know what it is, but it's one or the other, whatever. It's nuclear fuel to make nuclear bombs or something like that. But anyway, so they Van Damme's crew, Van Damme's character's name is Villain. It's so sort of like villain. They're mining this radioactive material so that they can sell it to the highest bidder, right? So that they can, essentially countries that normally can't make nuclear weapons, they can get these nuclear weapons to build that. So like a level up, right? It's plutonium, right? We're going from plutonium, so we're going from narco kingdom to selling plutonium, which is a little bit bigger than before, but from an action standpoint, this is still pretty meat and potatoes action, which is what we were looking for, especially after how well the first film does. So all of that really worked. I think the one thing that I didn't care for as much in this, and I understand that there's sort of an understanding with Villain's character why they do this, but we get the scene where kind of earlier on where Villain's character has gotten the drop on our heroes, and he's got Liam Hemsworth's character. He's holding him hostage and has everybody drop their weapons. And then he kills Liam Hemsworth's character in a fantastic way, right? He roundhouse kicks a knife that Scott Adkins is holding, his second in command baddie, right? He roundhouse kicks the knife into his chest, which if you're going to kill a Hemsworth on screen, I think that's the way you got to do it. So that was fantastic. But then he lets everybody else go, right? Oh, you're fine. Go ahead. You guys go about your business. And I was kind of like, well, he has a chance to just dispatch all of them right there. Wouldn't he just dispatch them? And I get the idea that Villain's character would have wanted them to die warriors' deaths, that he respected them enough, that he didn't really respect the kid enough to give him a warrior's death, but the other ones he would want them to die in battle. I get that a little bit, but considering we had all these really great moments where Chuck Norris saves the day, Schwarzenegger saves the day, we could have had somebody else save the day maybe, right? And I don't know, again, I don't know from a plot standpoint how it would fit to have Schwarzenegger or Norris come back in and save the day at that moment, but it would have been nice, just have somebody with a helicopter just hosing down the area with bullets, and Villain's like, oh, I'll see you some other time, you got lucky this time, but we'll come back for you, or something like that. From a plot standpoint, it would have made more sense, right? Because it ends up kind of feeling weird at the end when the Expendables are taking them all down, because it's they're taking them all down, but the only reason why they're taking them all down is because they were allowed to live when they shouldn't have been, right? That if Villain's character really were, Villain's crew were really on top of it, they would have dispatched them there. They would have taken care of business there. So that's one part of this plot that I wasn't a fan of. And there weren't any holes like that in the previous movie, right? There wasn't anything like that where I was like, I don't really like how they did that piece, or they could have done that better. This one had that one hole that didn't really work for me. But otherwise, I really, really liked it. You get guys like Dolph. Dolph's role is not as big in this one as it was in the previous one. He does get a few parts, but it's not quite that kind of shining thing. But it didn't really have to be either for him, right? He did his work in that previous one and got himself back on kind of on the big stage, which was really great to see. We've got Jet Li has an even shorter role, right? He's like barely in this one. He just there at the beginning, and then he's gone, and that's it. There's no more Jet Li. So there's that piece there. I like the sets in this. I thought the locations, the Eastern European locations that they use. I think they were filming in Bulgaria. All of that was really, really nice, and it set up a really great end fight scene at the airport. I like, too, that Schwarzenegger and Bruce Willis had bigger roles in this one than they did in the previous one. So then you throw in Chuck Norris into that. You throw in Jean-Claude Van Damme into that. You throw in Scott Adkins into that mix. And all of that really, really worked well. So, I think in looking at this from the series standpoint, I always think about, like, ranking them, right? Do you think, 2 is better than 1 or, however. I just think 2 is just a natural, organic, proper sequel to the first one. And when we get into 3 next time around, right, we're going to talk about how Stallone takes a left turn on all of this, right, where he thinks he wants to try to open this up to a wider audience and make more money. So he's looking at what he did here, and he's saying, okay, I got, I don't know if you'd say the boomers were into it, but definitely us Gen Xers or Xennials or whatever you want to call, me who's on the cusp or whatever. But the age group, right, for people that were born in the 70s and into the early 80s, they got us, right? They got us watching these movies. But I think the studios, I think Stallone, I think everybody involved, they saw bigger dollar signs. And it's interesting if you look at the time when this movie is made, right, when Part 2 comes out in 2012, right? And so at this point now, the machines are starting to move for some of these big franchises, right? Fast and Furious has made the jump, right? It's gone up to Fast 5, and it's now, pulling in bigger numbers than it was expected to. So you're just looking at, this movie here, right, that makes the jump up into, what was it, close to 300 million, I think, right? Or maybe over 300 this time. So, because the first one was 275, and so then the second one was 314. So again, 3 times its budget, which is what you want to be making. But you look at Fast 5, and again, I didn't want to necessarily get into a whole, doing grosses again like I was doing for the Fast 5 movies. But I'm kind of maybe trying to get into where Stallone's headspace is after this movie ends. But Fast 5 grosses 600, over 600 million in the theater with a budget not much more, about the same as this movie, right? It was a budget of about 25 million more. So that was that he saw some potential there, right? I think Stallone sees that, okay, Fast and Furious is making the move. Marvel's starting to make the move into these bigger franchises. And I think he feels like there's something that he could do out of this. And instead of just with Part 3 making another Expendables movie, he tries to get younger, he tries to get PG-13, he tries to do a whole bunch of things that sort of turned everybody off, right? And the movie ended up being sauteed in wrong sauce. And when we get into the next film, we'll get into that. But at least for right now, we'll kind of leave it on a good spot with Part 2 here. I think the 2 movies together, watching them back to back like I did when I was traveling, and then I saw Part 3 a little. Actually, no, I did Part 1 by itself, and then I did 2 and 3 together after. It was really kind of cool to see where we were again in 2012, where we see another movie of this type that brings us back to the late 80s, early 90s. We get something again that's for action fans. And I think it felt great, as the industry is starting to turn a little bit and become more big tent focused, and the Marvel machine starting to move, and movies like Fast and the Furious are becoming bigger franchises. The Mission Impossible. So it's almost like this push to get more franchises. We have a franchise that's ours, and it's a shame that this wasn't enough, right? That Part 2 wasn't enough, and they couldn't just look at the success of Part 2 and just make another Part 2, that we get the Part 3 that is, unfortunately sauteed in wrong sauce. But looking back on it and just being able to enjoy it and say, yeah, you know what? This movie, it did what we wanted a sequel to do. And it was bigger, and it was more fun, and it had more of the stuff in it that we really liked. It was, yeah, I don't know. It was just all really great. I mean, another thing I wanted to mention about this, as I'm kind of sort of wrapping up here, that the music piece of this, which is something that's going to come up in part 3 as well. I really liked that he was using music that that he listened to, that I don't know if all the characters would have listened to, to Dion, right? Or some of those ones, but because I mean, Jason Statham's not that old, right? He's born in the late 60s. I mean, obviously he's playing younger characters and other things, but he's sort of the younger guy out of that crew. But I really liked that too, that even the music, it established these guys as older guys, as guys that had been around, but that were cool, right? That there was a coolness about that piece, and I think that was another part of this that both movies that I really liked, was that the music was something that I could also get into, that it wasn't new stuff, that it wasn't like the movie was a vehicle for other artists to get their songs out, right? A lot of times that's what happens with movies now, is that like, the song, sometimes the songs play a part in the film, but sometimes it's just like, because nobody buys records or albums anymore, right? They put the movies in commercials, they put the songs in commercials, they put them anywhere they can to sort of, grow them. And this wasn't that, right? And maybe that's an area where he lost money, right? Because he's doing these older songs and he's not getting the money he might have gotten from studios that want to get their songs out that could have potentially, help fund the film. I mean, there's maybe reasons for why it's not necessarily a good thing to have all old music in your movies, but it was another piece of it that just sort of atmosphere creating that just, even if these songs were older than me, right, they still kind of felt like the movie was made for me. And I think more than anything, that's kind of what these first 2 Expendables movies are about, is that they're this sort of love letter to late 80s, early 90s action. And the characters in the films, or the actors in the films, Stallone being kind of foremost among them, but then, Van Damme, Dolph, Schwarzenegger, Bruce Willis, I could go on. They were the drivers in those films. They were the ones who made those films so exciting for us. And so, yeah, so to get the movies made for us, by us in a way, right? The second movie really solidifies it. It shows that Stallone still gets it. He still wants this to be that love letter to old action. And the other names involved all seem to get it. I mean, Chuck Norris really gets it, right? The Chuck Norris that we get in this movie is a lot of fun. And, you never know when you get these names in as cameos what they're going to do. So for him to be that fantastic, Chuck Norris is exactly the Chuck Norris that we want in this. Yeah, all of it was really driven home to me. And so I really, really appreciated that. I really, really appreciated that. And I keep saying really a lot. I don't know, that's kind of an American thing. We can't just appreciate something. We have to really, really appreciate it for people to understand that we appreciate it. We just can't trust that you'll believe me that I just appreciate something. But anyway, I think, going back to just watching these again and realizing, now that we've had 10 years since both of them came out, right? Now it's been 11 since 2012, 13 since 2010. Now that we've had this time between it, we've seen what the industry has done, that we've gotten even further away from the late 80s, early 90s action that we love, that you can't find any of it in DTV really anymore either. Jesse V. Johnson's doing it, I guess. Isaac Florentine's doing it, but nobody's really doing this stuff. And I'm hoping Expendables 4 is more like this stuff. But it was a reminder that, wow, we thought we missed it in 2010 and 2012. We really miss it now. Right? At least for me, I really miss it now. So seeing it again, it was just a lot of fun to go back and watch these. So yeah, so this is a great place to leave it. So again, in 2 weeks, we'll come back with 3 and 4. And again, it's probably not going to be as much of a love fest when we get into part 3. But watching part 3 again, there were some things that I did enjoy about it. So it's not going to be just a bashing either. There's going to be some good stuff in there that maybe you'll be surprised that you'll find I like there. So anyway, so why don't we wrap this up? Obviously because it's just me, I'll be doing my own plugs here. So dtvconnoisseur.blogspot.com. That's really where you can find everything. And actually, both of these movies, Expendables 1 and 2, I have reviewed on the site as well. So you can go to the site and take a look at those reviews and see kind of what I thought about them a little bit more. You can kind of see what I thought of them at the time when I watched them then, because I really reviewed them. I think I got them both on DVD the moment they came out on DVD and reviewed them then. Probably got them from Netflix. I don't usually buy DVDs as much. But anyway, so you can go to the site and check out those reviews there. I am on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, DTV Connoisseur. Getting a little bit more into Facebook because I'm seeing more engagement on Facebook, so I've been trying to use that one a little bit more. Facebook is Direct to Video Connoisseur. DTV Connoisseur on Instagram as well. It's one I haven't used as much, but I've been meaning to get on there, especially because John Cross is on there with After Movie Diner. So a lot of times he's posting about our current project, the Jim Belushi, middle-aged men watching 90s era Jim Belushi unironically, right? So that project that we've been doing, he's been posting on there, doing a lot of really great pub for it there, publicity or whatever. I don't know, did I just say pub? That was, yeah. Anyway, doing a lot of publicity for it there. He's made some really great videos, actually, if you go on Instagram. I think they're called Reels. I'm not sure if that's what they call them still, but he's done some really great ones about that project that we've been working on there. So yeah, so you can check that out as well. And then, of course, my novels. So my latest, the novella Bainbridge action novel, which, again, I think anybody who's listening to Expendables, right, me talk about Expendables, and you're excited to hear me talk about Expendables, I think you'd get a kick out of Bainbridge. I think you'd really enjoy Bainbridge. So $2.99 on Kindle, $6.99 on paperback, both on Amazon. Again, with the Kindle, you don't need to have a Kindle device or whatever those Kindle tablets. You don't need to have one of those specifically. You can just get the app on your phone or your iPad or whatever device you've got, and you can follow the movies that way. Or again, you can just buy the paperback. It does qualify for Prime, so if you have Amazon Prime, it's just the $6.99, maybe some tax as well. So that's my latest one in terms of novels. Holtman Arms, Girl and a Gun, Chad and Accounting. You can find all of those on Amazon as well. One thing you can do is also find my author page. There'll be a link to that in the description here. You can follow me as an author, so whenever my new novels come out, you'll know right away when you can buy them and pick them up there. And of course, I'm on Letterboxd as well, so you can use the Letterboxd to see. And Letterboxd is DTV Connoisseur as well. You can there see kind of roughly what my next movies are going to be. And of course, you can always reach out. The email is dtvconnoisseur@yahoo.com. So we've got a Yahoo email for the site as well. Feel free to reach out. I'm getting bombarded with screeners, but they're not like screeners like from like directors, like I talked about Nathan Hill earlier, or Nathan Shepka or some situation like that. It's like these publicity sites that are just like, check out this movie, check out that movie. And then I'll reach out and be like, hey, I'm kind of interested in that one. You want to send me a screener? Yeah, sure. Jim will send you the screener. Okay, great. Jim, send me the screener. And I never hear from Jim. So my email box is filled with those. So if you email me with a specific question or something like that, that'd be great. I wasn't keeping up as well with emails, but I am lately. So feel free to drop me a line. Let me know, if there's something you feel like I could cover on here, or something I could do differently or anything like that. I'm always happy to hear from everyone. So that's it. That is the Expendables 1 and 2. So next week, Ty from Compass will be back on, and then 2 weeks, we will wrap up this Expendables series with numbers 3 and 4. But thank you everybody for listening, and we'll talk soon. Bye, everyone.